So thanks, Manju. So thank you firstly for having me here. Hello, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. Let's quickly jump into our today's session. So first, we'll see on what Avro and Json is. So just a minute. Okay. So I'm sure that most of us here would have come across JSON data. So they are basically in a key value pair and they support all the data types. So the example that you see here has different fields like ID, name, subject, and address, where ID is of type number or integer, I can say, and number is a string, and subject is an array. Address here is an object. So JSON can have any number of fields and are enclosed within the flower brackets with key within the double quotes and uh, followed by a colon and then the value. So each field is separated by a semicolon. Avro, on the other hand, are created using the JSON format and can have a single or multiple fields. So Avro is used to define the structure of the data. So as a whole, I can say Avro is a generic schema against which we can validate our incoming or outgoing payload so that we can be sure that it is of the required format. In the example here again, the uh, type, namespace, name fields are the different fields that we have here. And again, the fields can be multiple or a single field itself. Here, the type refers as record, which means we can have multiple fields. And namespace is used to differentiate one schema from the other. And name will be a unique identifying name for the schema, which is usually the schema name. And fields, again, here it says name and type along with the corresponding name and the data type. So you might get a question like why we need this Avro or what are its advantages. So since as I said Avro schema defines the structure, it also documents the usage of fields. So this way it prevents any data misinterpretation and it will also be easier for other team members to know what exactly each field are without even asking for any clarification. It helps like the upstream and the downstream systems to know the right fields which are needed. So this way we can be more agile and only the valid data will flow from one system to the other. It helps in maintaining all the changes that are made in the Avro or in your data format, and all the teams can be aligned on the same format. Just to give you a clear picture on what this Avro schema is, I have a sample data here. So here the type is record, which can have multiple fields inside it, and I have namespace and name defined. So each field has name, type, and doc, where document is the optional field. You can include it or not. So this is the section where it defines what this field actually is. So here the name is employee name, right? So this document helps you to understand what this field exactly is. And then comes the type. Here the type is string. So when we say string or any other data type without using null, it is said to be a mandatory field. So we will have to send this particular field in the data that we are receiving or sending to the third party systems. So another example here is the type says null and string. This is an optional field. So we can either send the address line to field or send it as null. It will still accept. Whereas if you send the employee name as null, the system will not be accepting and it will throw an error back to you. So this is a sample JSON. So I have given the employee name, ID, everything. Address line 2 is null. So you can either pass an address or give it as null. It will still accept. Whereas the rest of the values are mandatory and should be sent. So yes, anybody has anything to ask? All right.
Can we make it optional? No, optional
Sorry, which field were you talking about?
means Yes, suppose employee name is there. Can we make it optional? Here we are saying that it is mandatory. Okay. Can you make it optional?
Yes, we can make it optional. If you
Hmm.
want to make it optional, you will have to give it in this format where it says null and string. So that way
Okay.
it takes null value. But sometimes, like name and IDs are the mandatory field. Like in such cases, you can give it as a string or your required data type to make sure that these values are inserted and not some random dummy system entered values.
Okay. Suppose we don't pass any value. Suppose in RAML we say that na, for this one it's optional and mandatory. It may take we may pass value, may not pass value. So in the same way, what you have defined in null and string, the same way we can make it as optional.
Correct, correct.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So for Avro to JSON and JSON to Avro conversion through Mule. Before that, let's see why we need this data conversion. Like in our today's session, we are converting this Avro into the JSON format and JSON to Avro, right? So why are we performing this transformation? First and foremost reason would be to prevent any data corruption while it transports through the network. And also, this can be done only when the end system supports the format. So maybe the end systems are expecting in a binary format or in the embedded data format. Only then we can be sending it in that format, and this will also help in preventing any data corruption that might occur. For Avro to JSON and JSON to Avro conversion, it is feasible only when the incoming data to MuleSoft is in the embedded format. So, what do I mean by embedded format here is that the data is binary plus the Avro. So, mostly in this session, you will be seeing all the conversions from binary to JSON and JSON to binary using Avro. Similarly, we can achieve this for different data formats as well. Like here in this case, we're using binary to JSON, right? For any data formats, you can still apply the same approach. I'll just show you
So
a.
the end will be only in binary format. Suppose that we wants to convert into the XML format.
Mhm.
So it will going to support.
Yes, you can still do it.
Okay.
So this is the binary embedded data that you're seeing on your screen. So this is the binary data and this is the Avro. So whatever you're receiving into the Mule has to be in this format itself, which is binary plus Avro. And this we will be converting back into JSON. And again, the JSON will be this. So when we convert this particular embedded data, it will come convert into this particular JSON data. And again, you can convert JSON back to embedded format. So let's see a quick demo how it is done. So I'm using a HTTP listener component here, first for binary to JSON. And the embedded payload, I'm sending it as it is here, setting it as the variable, setting it as the payload and giving the MIME type as application Avro. And here it is just the payload we are passing and converting the output to be application JSON and writing it into a file. And for JSON to binary, we will receive the JSON data through the HTTP listener. I'm giving the location where my actual Avro file is. So this is the same Avro file, Avro schema that you just saw in the notepad. And then we will be writing it to the file. So I've already deployed the application.
So yeah, question is why we require the yeah, this one schema for that one. It's just like the in XML. you define the schema for that one. So we need to have the same data format like this one.
Okay, so let me just rephrase your question. Like, do you mean like why do we need this
Yeah,
Avro schema, right?
yeah, schema, yeah.
Okay, so what you see here is Avro plus the binary. What this binary data does is that it validates against the Avro schema and makes sure that all mandatory fields are present and it is in the required format. So
Okay,
Avro basically helps us to check if the structure is correct and if all the fields are correct.
okay.
So it will validate against the Avro and then convert it into the JSON only if it uh,
Passes. Hmm.
only if all the conditions satisfy it will convert into JSON.
Okay.
So just what we discussed earlier, like maybe one of the field is mandatory but you're not passing the value. Your
Okay.
employee name is a mandatory field
Hmm.
but you send it as null,
Hmm.
then the Avro conversion itself fails.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
can also show you how that works. So first let's check for the positive scenario.
Okay.
So for binary to JSON, I am passing this data. Whatever we have here, this is the embedded data, right? So I'm passing that in the Avro. Okay, looks like I have selected a wrong file. Let me just what was the file name? JSON to binary. Just a minute. Yeah, so binary to JSON conversion is complete and I'm saving it in the output folder. So yeah, so the one that I sent had employee name as Shruti in it. So we have got it that way. Now I'll pass this particular file, this exact file, and let's see how the output file would look like. So it's already copy pasted. I'll do it one more time. I've selected raw data body JSON. So JSON to binary conversion is also done. So this has all the binary characters in it along with the actual Avro. So whenever we perform this transformation in Mule, it will always have the Avro schema embedded with it. Now, as I said, in case I do not pass any of the mandatory field, so name was a mandatory field, I'll just remove that. I'll also clear the console. Okay, so it says unable to write null as it expects string value. So it is a mandatory field, and if you're not passing that field, it will throw you an error.
Okay.
So this will help like all the upstream and downstream systems to be in line on the format. Since MuleSoft is an integration application, right? So we have upstream and downstream here. Just by having this Avro, we can align with other teams as well and maintain one common data format.
So here the question is, we manually we need to create a schema for this Avro file.
So
Schema.
this Avro, what we
Uh,
have created is for JSON. So
so suppose that we wants to create a schema for this one. So we need to manually create, or is there tools are there to? Uh,
I
uh,
suppose there are tools also available using
okay.
which you can generate it
Okay.
automatically.
Okay.
This Avro schema usually is built upon the JSON. So in case you have one JSON
Mm-hmm.
and you know what are the fields that you will be receiving, based
Okay.
on that you can generate your own Avro schema.
Okay. Yeah. So we need to create manually. Okay. Yeah.
No, manually you can do it, or you can also see if there are any online tools, because
Yeah.
I haven't used any online tools.
No, because in my project we have used it. So there is no as such tools are there. So when manually we need to create a schema. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anjani, I guess there are some online websites, like I posted one in the chat. Maybe
Okay.
that can help you. You can see that.
Okay. Thank you.
And can you show the transform message component of your binary to JSON flow once again?
Yes, here it is. So it is
Okay, nothing
a
special about
simple
it.
transformation.
I wasn't sure if I got it in the first try, so no. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So can we just continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see how we can use Confluent Schema Registry and do it more efficiently. So to use Confluent Schema Registry connector, you must have Studio version of 7.12.1 and runtime version of 4.4.0, and also a Confluent Cloud account. So ideally the Studio and the runtime version are the latest. So by using Confluent Schema Registry, we can reduce the size of the message. In real time scenarios, it is usually in we have a lot of data coming in, right? It is not just few kbs or mbs. In case we have millions of record, if Avro schema gets added to it, then the size of the payload will increase, and it will also be a huge performance hit to our API. And not all systems might support this embedded data format as compared to binary or other formats. So by using Confluent Schema Registry, it will be easier and faster, I can say. You can convert from one format to other. Here it is just an illusion. We are just showing you how we can create Confluent Cloud account. So for that, you will have to sign up and create an account. Okay, so first you'll have to select, if you are a new user, you will have to create your own cluster. So the basic is the free version, which is available for 60 days. And you can select the cloud type, which is storage cloud type, AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft. And also give a cluster name here. And how do we create this schema registry? So this schema registry is the place where all your schemas are stored. So to do that, under the schema registry tab, again select the storage type that you want and also the region, and you can directly add your schemas there. I'll log into my account and show you how you can manually um, insert or create your own schemas there. Okay, I have already created my own cluster. So we'll have to select the environment. The environment by default, it will be the default one. And here, go to the schema registry section. So you can see all the schemas that you have registered here. Click on view and manage schema, and you can add a new schema here. All that you have to do is give the subject name, which will be your schema name, and copy paste the entire content. Click on create. You can also validate to see if your schema is of the correct format or the type. So maybe we would have missed a bracket or a comma somewhere. So validate will help us to validate if it is in the right format. And once you click on create, a new schema will automatically be added here. I already have one schema here, and it says, sorry, so it says the current version to be 1. In case there is an update on the existing schema, we can update it here again, and the version will change to 2. And you can choose which version you want to view and use it. So here you can change your versions. Since it is just 1, you see only 1 here. This is the schema ID which will be generated for every schema that you create, and this value will be unique. And under this code section, you will see your Avro schema that was added. Okay. So Confluent Schema Registry connector, you can download it from Exchange. The version that is latest is 1.0.8, and these are the different operations that you can see under Confluent Schema Registry connector. Okay, so in Avro to JSON conversion, here we are not using any embedded data or anything. It will just be a binary to JSON conversion and JSON to binary conversion. So to do that, we will be using the schema ID that we just saw. So using this schema ID, we can easily convert from one format to other. Let's see a demo on how this can be achieved. So we just saw how we can manually insert our schema into Confluent Cloud, right? This can also be done through MuleSoft directly. So you need not always go and do it manually. You can also do it through MuleSoft. Let's see what are the configurations we have done here. Yeah, you will have to give the username, password, base URI. How do we find this username, password, and base URI? For that, you can go back to schema registry and scroll down. You will have the API endpoint here. This will be the endpoint using which you can insert your schemas, and you can create your own API credential. Just click on edit, add key. It will generate a new key and secret. You can give a description. You can also create multiple keys here, and you can download it and share it with your stakeholders. I have already generated one API key for myself, so I'm using it for using it as username, password, and base URI. Here again, I'm using a listener connector using which I will be sending my Avro schema. And in the payload, this is the format that we will have to send it to the register schema for subject. This is schema colon the payload. The payload will be dynamic, and this way, whatever payload your postman will get inserted. We are giving the subject name. I've given here as employee canonical model, and body will be the payload. So here, as of now, we just have one Avro here. I'll run the application and try inserting another one, which is employee canonical model. Let's wait for the application to deploy. Okay. So I will now and run the. So I've given the endpoint details here and it is post method. I am passing my Avro schema here. So the catch here is that the Avro schema that you will be passing has to be in a single line format. So there are these escape characters, right? These slashes. So it accepts only in this particular format. There are online tools available using which you can convert it into a single line format. Okay, schema has been registered. Okay, so this is the one that we just inserted, employee canonical model, and the version is 1. This has the schema ID as 100001. Okay, this has the same schema ID as the previous one. That is because I'm passing the same schema again. Even though the names are different, since the schema is same, it is taking the same schema ID. So this has been now registered. I will just delete the previous one to avoid the conflict. Okay. So once this is done, we can now call a reference to this particular schema ID and convert it to the required format. So here again, first we'll see how do we convert binary to JSON. Before that, let's look at the binary data. Okay, looks like I do not have the binary data. Okay, here it is. So just comparing this embedded data here, you see how many lines of code we have. Whereas only the binary data is in one single line. In the real time scenarios, as I just explained, when we have millions of record, just for one record, one small record, you can see how much the difference is there. So this way it will bring down your performance when the number of data is more. And by using this Confluent Schema Registry, the performance will be better and faster as well. Now I'll be passing this binary data. For binary to JSON, I have already selected the file. It is a post method. Oh, sorry. I'll give you a walkthrough first and then we can see how it works. Here we will have to change the ID. The connector configuration will remain the same. It is still the username, password, and the endpoint. Here I'm updating the ID. This can also be dynamic. For now, I've just hard coded it. Then replace ID with here we give the actual message which has to be converted and then the schema. This schema will get picked up from the ID. So get schema by ID will help us to get the actual schema, and this vars.employee.schema will iterate over to get the schema. And set payload, we are just having a payload here and converting into JSON. Whatever the payload we received, we are just converting it and storing it in a file. For JSON to binary, we will have a JSON input coming, which here we are using this output as application Avro, and the schema URL is taken from our source main resource location. This is the Avro against which it gets added. And then the Avro is replaced with the ID. So the Avro will no longer be there in your payload. It will just be the binary data once it is out of this Confluent Schema Registry. And we are just setting the payload and storing it in a file. So I'll run the binary to JSON application first. Okay, I'm not printing anything here. There's no logger. Okay. So in the output file, a new file got added. So the binary data, this binary data got converted into the same JSON. And now we'll pass this particular JSON and get back binary. So I'm passing this binary data. I'll copy paste. Okay, so it got converted into the binary format. So this is how we can achieve any conversion using the Confluent Schema Registry. So yeah, that's all I had from my side. You guys can ask me any questions if you have.
Yeah, hi Shruti. I think we have one question. So let me read it out to you. Robinson is asking the question like, what is the difference from JSON schema to Avro schema?
Okay, so JSON Avro schema is basically built up using the JSON structure itself. But what do we understand by Avro is that Avro is like a structure or generic schema which will define what are your mandatory and not mandatory fields and what is the exact structure. Let me bring it on my screen. Looks like I closed it. Just give me a minute. Okay. So this is the Avro schema that you see here. All this is a Avro schema, which will tell what are the fields that you must have in your JSON file. Like we have employee ID, employee name, address type. All these will be defined here. All the fields along with its type and document. So, is that clear or anything else?
Yeah, I think that should answer the question. So, yeah, if not, feel free to go ahead and uh, type it, Robinson. So we have one more question. So from Roshan, uh, where do we encounter binary plus Avro data? So I'm thinking like he's referring for a business case or a use case where that could be a scenario where binary plus Avro data will be used to share across the system or applications.
Okay, so as per what I have worked is I work for a pharmaceutical industry where we are receiving the data in the form of binary plus the Avro schema. So it is usually the Avro schema is given to us by the vendor itself. So whoever is sending you the input will also have this binary data and the Avro data with them. So they can do it and give it for you. So again, it depends on your business requirement. If they accept it in the embedded format, then well and good, they will send and you can send back in the same format. If not, as I said, usually not everybody or all the organizations accept in this embedded format, right? So in such cases, Confluent Schema Registry is what you will have to use.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Shruti.
Yeah. Thanks, Shruti. Yeah, it's like good information. So even I was not aware like which industry this Avro schema is basically used. So you mentioned that. Yeah, thanks for that. So do we have any more questions? So let me go to the chat section one more time. So uh, I think no. I think here so we don't have any more questions in the chat. I see. So yeah, you can proceed to the next slide, Shruti.
Okay. So these are some of the resources that all of you can go through during your free time. And GitHub link has the actual code. All the code that I just showed you is available on the GitHub. You can download them, go through them, and any queries you can anytime feel free and ping me on LinkedIn. And there is also a Medium blog on Confluent Schema Registry where I have clearly noted down the steps from how do you uh, how do you download it and convert, do all the conversions, just to what you saw in this meetup.